I remember the exact moment my world shifted. I was sitting at a dinner table, my fork resting unused on a plate of perfectly seared salmon, while three people I was supposed to be family with tag-teamed me. Chloe sat across from me, silent, her eyes fixed on her plate, refusing to meet mine. Her dad was talking about investments in your future, and her mom was chiming in about how modest weddings are always remembered as the sad ones. They had charts, printed out, showing average wedding costs and payment plans for loans. It felt like I was in a bizarre business meeting, and I was the product they were trying to sell, or rather, get me to buy into something I deeply opposed. But to understand how I even got to that table, feeling completely cornered, we have to go back. Way back. I grew up in Willow Creek, Vermont. You know, the kind of small town where people don't really flash their money around. Where a 10-year-old pickup truck is a badge of honor if it still runs well. My parents taught me to save, to live within my means, and never to get into debt for things I didn't absolutely need. I worked hard, made good money, and had a solid chunk saved up. My little house was paid off, no car payments, no credit card debt. I called it freedom. Some might call it boring, but I was content. Then I met Chloe at a backyard barbecue my friend Jake threw. She just walked in. This confident, stylish woman, dressed to the nines, completely out of place among the jeans and t-shirts. She was from Boston, worked in marketing, and had this incredible energy. We got to talking, and she told me she was exhausted by the city's rat race, tired of trying to keep up. She said my calm, grounded approach to life was refreshing. That word stuck with me, like I was a cool drink on a hot day. For a few months, it was perfect. She'd drive down from Boston on weekends. We'd have coffee on my porch, go fishing at the lake, cook dinner, just soak in the quiet. She laughed at herself when she couldn't bait a hook. She kept saying how different my world was, how lucky she felt to have found someone not obsessed with status. I remember one night, under a sky full of stars, she looked at me with those soft eyes and said she finally felt like she could breathe. That was it. That's when I completely fell for her. I thought I'd found someone who truly understood me. But then, little things started. Small comments, I brushed them off. Jokes about my truck being older than some of her friends' kids. Remarks about needing to upgrade to a nicer restaurant than the local diner. Mentions of her friend's amazing Boston apartments with skyline views. I thought it was harmless banter. Then she'd scroll social media, showing me huge diamond engagement rings her friends got. She'd laugh, "Can you imagine spending that much?" But there was always this flicker in her eyes, this longing I tried to ignore. She talked about her old life more, the fancy dinners, weekend getaways, designer clothes. Always following it with, "But I don't miss any of that." That should have been my first real red flag. Tired is not changed. She wanted a break, not a fundamental shift in values. About 8 months in, I decided. I wanted to marry her. I'd saved my whole adult life for this. I bought a beautiful sapphire engagement ring, her favorite gemstone, set in white gold with accent stones. It wasn't a massive diamond, but it was elegant, unique. It felt like us. I proposed on that same porch, at sunrise, coffee growing cold because we were lost in the moment. She said yes. She cried happy tears. The first week was a dream. Then came the first crack. We drove to her parents' house in Boston. She was fidgeting the whole way, nervous. Her mom, Sarah, opened the door, all smiles, and immediately grabbed Chloe's hand to see the ring. I watched her mom's smile falter, just slightly. Her eyes flicked to mine, a look I couldn't decipher. Her dad, more subtle, offered congratulations, but the judgment was palpable. Sarah made a comment about sapphires being an interesting choice, with way too much enthusiasm. You know that tone, when someone's trying too hard to be polite about something they dislike? Chloe barely showed the ring to anyone else that day. Didn't post photos. The drive home was quiet. Uncomfortably quiet. She just said she was tired. But I saw the way she looked at that ring when she thought I wasn't watching, twisting it, as if trying to imagine it as something else. That night, lying in bed, I let myself think the thought I'd been pushing away: was she embarrassed by what I gave her? Had the woman who loved my simple life just been waiting for me to become someone different? Someone who could give her the life she'd left behind? The comment about the ring wasn't about the sapphire. It was about me. About not meeting their financial expectations. I was being evaluated like an investment, and I'd failed the first assessment. I should have asked, if she's embarrassed to show her family, how will she feel showing her friends, her coworkers? But I was in love. And love, well, it has a way of blinding you. Wedding planning started. I envisioned 50 people, close family, intimate. She pulled out her laptop, and the guest list grew: 50, 75, 100, then over 200. Rude not to invite everyone, she said. My intimate celebration turned into a corporate event. She showed me vineyards, historic mansions, waterfront properties with year-long waiting lists. Every single option came with a price tag that made my stomach knot. When I mentioned cost, she'd wave it off. Weddings are expensive. This is normal. I suggested our community hall in Willow Creek, or an outdoor ceremony by the lake. Her face would cloud over, that tight smile telling me I'd said the wrong thing. She started using our special day and once-in-a-lifetime like magic words to justify any spending. The catering was our first real fight. I found a local caterer, great food, reasonable prices, buffet style. Chloe looked at the proposal for 30 seconds, then pulled up premium companies with plated, multi-course meals and wine pairings. It would triple our food budget. Buffets looked cheap and tacky, she insisted. Her family would judge us. I tried to explain that most people wouldn't care, they'd just be happy to celebrate. But she was already on to hiring a live band instead of a DJ. Every wedding conversation became a negotiation. I was unreasonable for wanting a budget, she was just trying to make sure we didn't embarrass ourselves. I dreaded those talks. Then, one night, I couldn't sleep. My phone was charging, so I grabbed her laptop to check email. The browser was still open. Tabs. She'd been Googling how to upgrade engagement ring, looking at diamond replacements, before and after photos of rings with bigger center stones. I sat there in the dark, something breaking inside me. She'd never said a word about being unhappy with my ring. But here was the evidence. All the time she'd angled her hand away in photos, kept it in her pocket. All the signs I'd missed. That was the moment I realized she'd never been happy with what I offered. She'd just been waiting for me to offer more. The bridesmaid situation pushed things further. She wanted her sister, Sarah, and 3 friends. Fine. Until she announced they all needed specific, custom-ordered dresses that cost several $100s each, plus alterations, plus matching shoes. Sarah called me, her voice tight with stress. She had 2 kids, a mortgage, a tight budget. She tried talking to Chloe about cheaper options, but Chloe had shut her down, calling her unsupportive. Sarah hoped I could get through to her. When I brought it up, Chloe's response made my blood run cold. If people can't afford to be in my wedding, maybe they're not the right people to have standing beside me. Real friends will find a way to make it work. This is my one chance to have everything perfect, and I'm not compromising because other people have financial problems. I stared at her, genuinely not recognizing the woman who used to talk about how exhausting it was to keep up with expectations. Now she was creating those same expectations. The breaking point was her bachelorette party. Her friends planned a weekend in Las Vegas, clubs, bottle service. They expected the bridesmaids to chip in for Chloe's expenses, on top of their own. We're talking well over $1,000 per person. Sarah called me again, practically in tears. She couldn't afford it. Chloe was making her feel guilty, posting in the group chat about sisterhood and how hurt she was that not everyone was excited. I finally sat Chloe down. We needed a serious talk about money, expectations, what we could actually afford. That's when she brought up the loan. She'd already researched wedding loans, calculated how much we could borrow based on my income. She presented it like the obvious solution. Everyone takes out loans. We'll pay it back. The monthly payments won't be bad if we adjust our lifestyle. I felt the walls closing in. I was cornered. I told her no. I wouldn't start our marriage buried in debt for one day. Wouldn't sacrifice our future for a party. That's when she called me cheap. Said I was selfish, small-minded. Asked if I even loved her, because if I did, I'd want to give her the wedding she deserved. She said I was embarrassing her, that everyone could see I wasn't willing to provide for her. Maybe I made a mistake thinking you were the kind of man who could make me happy. Those words hung in the air. That's when I realized this wasn't about a wedding anymore. This was about who we fundamentally were. And we were not the same. Chloe had been slowly escalating her demands, testing my boundaries. Every time I agreed to something bigger, it reset her baseline. The guest list, the venue, the dresses, each compromise paved the way for the next, more expensive demand. This isn't always physical, you know? Sometimes control is exerted through money, through making you feel small for not meeting impossible standards. And that accusation, that I didn't love her enough? That's the ultimate emotional manipulation. She was weaponizing my feelings, trying to make me prove my love by destroying my financial stability. The cruelest part was that she'd sought out someone with my values, stable, debt-free, because it made me a good provider. But now those same values were being twisted into flaws. So, there I was, back at that dinner table. Her dad was telling me I needed to think about what kind of man I wanted to be, the kind who stepped up for his family or the kind who let them down. That's when it clicked. This wasn't about love or commitment. This was about control, appearances, and funding a fantasy that had nothing to do with me. I set my fork down. Looked at Chloe. Waited for her to say something, anything, to defend me, to say we'd figure it out. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Just stared at her plate. So I said it. The thing I'd held back for weeks. I won't sacrifice my future for one day. I've worked too hard to build a stable life to throw it away on a party. If Chloe needs me to go into debt to prove I love her, then maybe we want different things out of this marriage. The silence was deafening. Chloe's face went red, then white. She finally looked at me, eyes full of anger. Her dad started to speak, but I was already standing. Thanked them for dinner. Walked to the door. Chloe followed me outside, under the porch light. She told me I was making the biggest mistake of my life. I looked at her, and I said, I'm pretty sure marrying someone who valued a wedding more than a marriage was the bigger mistake. Then I got in my truck and drove away. The next few weeks were brutal. Chloe told everyone I was cheap and controlling, that I'd promised her a beautiful wedding and backed out. She said she'd wasted 2 years on someone who didn't value her. Her version spread like wildfire. I got messages from people I barely knew, telling me what a terrible person I was. Jake told me to ignore it, said anyone who knew me would see through it, but it still stung. A month later, I heard through Sarah that Chloe had started dating someone new, Michael, a lawyer. He apparently had money and wasn't afraid to spend it. Part of me felt relieved. Maybe the drama would die down. But Chloe being Chloe, moving on quietly wasn't her style. She posted constantly, designer bags, fancy restaurants, weekend trips. Always with captions about finally being treated the way she deserved. I stopped checking her social media after a while. But updates kept trickling in from mutual friends. Apparently, Chloe was already talking wedding plans with Michael, looking at venues, showing off a new engagement ring that made my sapphire look like a toy from a vending machine. Friends said she was pushing Michael even harder than she'd pushed me. Every conversation was about the wedding, about making sure everything was perfect this time. I almost felt bad for the guy. Then, one Saturday, about 6 months after I walked away, I ran into Jessica at the grocery store. She'd been one of Chloe's bridesmaids, and we'd always gotten along. She looked genuinely happy to see me, which was a surprise, and suggested coffee. We sat down, and she told me she'd felt terrible about how everything went down, that she never believed Chloe's version. She just needed to vent. Jessica told me everything. Chloe had pushed Michael to book the most expensive venue in the region. Insisted on an even bigger guest list. Demanded a ring upgrade just months after he proposed. The bridesmaids were stressed about costs again. Chloe had picked even more expensive dresses, and the bachelorette party was now planned for Cancun. But here's the thing that made my coffee taste better than it had any right to. Michael had started asking questions. Started pushing back. Started realizing this wedding wasn't about building a life together, but about putting on a show. 2 weeks before they were supposed to send out invitations, he called the whole thing off. Told Chloe he couldn't marry someone who cared more about the wedding than the marriage. Jessica said Chloe was devastated. Not because she'd lost Michael, but because she'd lost the wedding. Lost the chance to prove to everyone she could have the perfect day. I wish I could say I felt nothing, but the truth is, I felt vindicated. Like the universe had confirmed I made the right choice. A few months later, I sold my small house and put a down payment on a bigger place. A real house with land and a view, room to grow. The kind of property I'd always dreamed about but never bought because I was saving for a future that turned out to be an illusion. I started dating again, eventually. Nothing serious at first. Just coffee and conversations with people who didn't measure my worth by my willingness to go into debt. Life got quieter, simpler, better in ways that had nothing to do with money or status. And sometimes, late at night, I'd think about that moment in her parents' driveway, walking away from someone I thought I'd spend my life with. And I'd feel grateful, not sad. Here's what I learned: love shouldn't come with a price tag. The person who truly wants to build a life with you will care more about that life than the party you throw to announce it. When someone shows you who they really are, especially with money and values, believe them the first time. Those little comments Chloe made about my truck, my house, those weren't jokes. They were her real feelings leaking out. And when someone uses love as leverage, when they tell you that proving your affection requires you to damage yourself financially or emotionally, that's not love. That's control in a romantic disguise. I didn't lose a fiancé that night. I escaped a future I would have regretted forever. I escaped years of debt, years of feeling like I was never enough. The wedding she wanted would have lasted one day, but the debt would have lasted years, and the resentment? Even longer. Sometimes, the best decision you can make is the one that disappoints everyone else but saves yourself. What would you do if someone you loved asked you to compromise everything you'd worked for?